My father left me the house when he died, but after 15 years, my mother kicked me out and told me to live with her new family. I tried to get the house back, but they threatened me, so I went to the police. I'm 24 years old. First, I want to say that my mother kicked me out because she needed to please her new husband. Well, if being thrown out of the house sounds harsh, we can say that she threw me out of her house and left me with my father. I have many fond memories of my father before he died. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 7 years old. I was devastated. I had a very close relationship with my father, and it broke my heart to see him in the coffin. I can still vividly remember that moment, and to this day I still grieve for the loss of my father. Just as I was still dealing with the loss of my father, my mother appeared with another man and insisted that I call him Dad. I thought that's impossible. I don't know if I was right, but I didn't think it was appropriate to call him Dad just a few months after my father died. After our first meeting, I often found him in my mother's bedroom, and it was hard to see how quickly she had accepted the new man. She didn't even wait a year before bringing my father's replacement into the family. I wasn't ready to accept him as my father's replacement. While they planned their beautiful wedding, they threw a big wedding for second-time married people, which had nothing to do with me anyway. She left me with my grandparents for her honeymoon, and a month passed without her showing up. I kept asking my grandparents when my mom was coming to get me, but they had no answer. Then suddenly one day she showed up. I was so happy to see her after so long that I rushed over to hug her, but she had brought all my things with her and dumped me with my grandparents, and I was heartbroken. I lived with my grandparents until I finished high school. I was happy with them. My mother would visit occasionally and just tell me how much she loved me and cared about me. Sometimes I would ask her why she had left me with my grandparents if she loved me so much. She would be at a loss for words and just say, "Your grandparents are old and need help with the shopping and taking out the trash." It was a long time before she admitted the real reason she gave up my room to her stepchildren. Bill's mother's husband had 2 children, and they moved in with us after they got married. My mother valued her new family above me, and naturally I resented her for it. So eventually I stopped bothering her after I graduated from high school and moved out of my grandparents' house, but I still visited them often. They were like saviors to me and they raised me. If it weren't for them, my childhood would have been ruined. Now I'm 24, and after working in marketing for a year, I want to start my own company. I need money, so I thought of renting out my house. Oh, and if I haven't mentioned this already, my mom and her lovely family are going through a bit of a downer. The house they live in actually belongs to me. Yes, that's right. My dad made a will before he died, and he very carefully left me all his money, including the house. When I was little, his solicitor read the will after he died, but from the look on my mom's face, I'm pretty sure she didn't like it one bit. I later learned that she tried several times to have the will overturned, but failed every time. My father stipulated very clearly in his will that the house was mine, but that I could only sell or transfer it after I turned 21. Until then, no one was allowed to touch the property. My grandparents thought that my father might have foreseen my mother's plans, which is why he made the strict will. Otherwise, she might have manipulated me into giving her the house when I was young. Last month, I called my mother to tell her that I planned to rent out the house, but she didn't answer my calls this week. When I went to see my grandparents, I told them that I planned to make some extra money from the house, and they reacted strangely. I asked them what was wrong, and they said that I might have to face a lot of resistance from my mother, because her stepdaughter had conceived a teenage boy, and the boy had shirked his responsibilities, and Bill had also lost his full-time job and was working at the store at night, so basically they were in a bad financial situation now. I really don't know what to do. I mean, I need that house now too. I've quit my job. I need the money to start my business. Update 1: things got pretty dramatic. Like I said, I started where I left off. My grandparents told me that my mom and her family are going through a rough time, so they probably won't be able to vacate my house. I think I will tell my mother about my plans and give them a few months to sort out their lives. Before that, I would have liked to give them a month's notice, but considering their situation, I think I will give them 3 to 4 months. As my mother did not answer the phone, I went to her house to find her. The house was the same as before, and my mother was not at home either, all caught up in a cold. Perhaps she sensed the motive of my visit this time. Seeing me at the door, she gave a fake smile and perfunctorily hugged me. You have to understand that we haven't seen each other for almost 10 years. Yes, she stopped visiting me after I hit puberty. Yes, I was cold towards her. Why, after all these years, did she not ask me how I was doing when we met? She knew nothing about me. As if you coming here must mean something important has brought you to my home. My inner Joy said, no, nothing important, just came to see you. It's been a long time, she said with a smile, of course. The silence lasted another 5 minutes, until I got up and left. It was definitely unpleasant, and I didn't feel welcomed at all. Apart from Mum, my pregnant stepsister was also at home, and she gave me a very unfriendly look, as if I were the cause of the trouble. I gave up on the idea of repossessing the house and started looking for other ways to finance my business. But Mum's self-indulgence had reached its peak last week. Last week was the 15th anniversary of my father's death, and my grandparents had a small prayer service in the church. Since I was in town, I decided to hold a decent ceremony. By providing food for the poor and gifts for underprivileged children, I invited my friends and relatives to the prayer meeting. I also sent an invitation email to my mother, but when I checked my email history, she hadn't replied. I found that she hadn't even opened it. It was the first time I had emailed her, and I thought it had gone into the junk folder or something, so I went to her house again. This time my stepsister Brenda answered the door. Without saying hello or greeting me, she asked me straight out, "What do you want?" I said I was here to see Mum. She said, "Do you think she wants to see you after the way she spoke to you last time?" She spoke so bluntly that I didn't understand, and I bluntly said that I had come to invite my mother to attend my father's prayer service. She smiled at me and said that it was all centuries ago and you are still obsessed with it, so stop it. I said, "I'm sorry, he is my father, you have no right to comment." She rolled her eyes and went back to her room. I sat there like an idiot for a few minutes, and then left a note for my mother to call me back. She called me the next day and I told her about the prayer ritual. She was silent for a while, then said go because she had to take her Brenda for a checkup, which was really frustrating. I mean, she could have said she'd try her best, but a straight refusal was disappointing. I replied sarcastically, "Yes, of course they're your priorities. We're nothing to you, so that's that. Good luck raising that narcissistic woman and her bastard child." She was furious because I used that word. I said, "Why should I be nice to her when she was so mean to me?" She mocked my emotions and defended her mother, saying it was normal for her to be angry. You can't talk about death in front of a pregnant woman. You're as heartless as your father was. When she said that, I lost my temper. I yelled at her that she shouldn't talk about my father. If anyone here is heartless, it's her. The way she talked about my dead father. She said, "Your father died 15 years ago. Years ago, damn it, you should have forgotten about it." I said, "Sure, just like you'll forget about it in a few weeks or days. Who knows? You know, you don't need to come. My father won't like your prayers after seeing your true colors." I hung up the phone and hired a lawyer that same day, and started sending legal notices of eviction. It took the lawyer about 15 days to authenticate my father's will, and send the notice to my mother as expected. She was obviously horrified when the eviction notice arrived. She had never thought I would resort to such extreme measures to retaliate against her for not attending my father's prayer sessions. I mocked her voicemail and blocked her from any contact. She was horrified when the eviction notice arrived. She had obviously never thought I would resort to such extreme measures to retaliate against her for not attending my father's prayer sessions. I mocked her voicemail and blocked her number so she couldn't contact me. She showed up at my grandparents' house when I wasn't there. Oh yes, I was living with my grandparents again until I got back on my feet. My mother asked my grandparents to convince me to withdraw the eviction notice. My grandparents are calm and kind people, which is why they didn't throw her out. They said they had no say in the matter, that it was my property and I could do whatever I wanted with it. The answer didn't go down well with her, and she accused my grandparents of raising me to be a self-righteous child. What drugs was she on to say something like that? I asked my grandmother why she didn't say something to my narcissistic mother. My grandparents were like, "We don't want to upset such a woman." That I said, "I want to upset her. And now I won't let them stay in my house one more day." That I served an eviction notice in accordance with the country's tenant law, even though they weren't tenants and they hadn't paid me any rent. Moreover, I pay the property tax every year, so legally I have the right to evict them immediately. My grandparents are God-fearing people. God-fearing people, they advised me to drop the idea, saying, "For goodness sake, give them another month to find somewhere else to live. There's a pregnant woman there, we shouldn't throw her out onto the street." I sighed. She doesn't need any help either, she's equally toxic. My grandparents said to let her go. She may be a sinner, but the child in her womb is not. Don't be cruel to that little life. They convinced me to wait or I would evict them right that day. The next day I got a call from my mom, which I didn't answer. When I called her, she did the same to me. She sent me a message saying it was urgent, asked me to check my calendar, and to meet her at my grandparents' house at a time I had free. It made her very unhappy. She sent a long reply saying that I was putting pressure on her. What did I do? I wrote her 5 paragraphs and did nothing. Yes, I didn't respond, and she probably understood that throughout my childhood. No matter if I cried or threw a tantrum because I had to go home instead of being loved, she would never give in to my pressure. She would scold me and demand that I behave, that I be a good boy and not throw tantrums. In order to make her happy and not make her angry, I stopped crying but sulked in a corner for hours. Not anymore now, it's her turn to sulk, but unfortunately she doesn't have her own corner. So she comes to me and I purposely make her wait for an hour. She gets anxious. I told my grandparents to leave it alone, but she kept asking them about me. They said they didn't know, and when I went to look for her they quickly went back to their room. She looked at me with a "where the hell are you" look. She waited here for an hour, but she didn't say anything. She just sat there expressionless. If it had been anyone else, they would have tried to please me, but she stuck to her guns. She said, "Okay, let's get started. I can't sit here forever. I have work to do." I muttered something about how, of course, finding a place was difficult. She looked at me angrily and said, "What is this notice?" I replied that it was written in English, and I was sure you could read, or do you need me to read it for you? She got very angry, threw the notice in my face and said she was not moving because of a stupid notice. After she had finished yelling, I said, "Then let's wait and see the consequences of not complying with a court order." She said, "Just like I gave birth to you, you are not going to fool me. The house belongs to my husband, and no one can throw me out." I said, "Of course legally you can." I calmly responded to her just to annoy her, and she was indeed annoyed, but when she mentioned my dad, I really lost my temper. How dare you call him your husband when you have set aside his prayers and said that he is history? You don't deserve his house, you are just an illegal occupant. I will liberate the house from all vampires. She stood up and said that she had been very nice to me, and now I had to deal with her lawyer. I laughed and said, "Of course, we still have 20 days to see what she will do next." Update 2. As I mentioned in my previous post, after a lot of fighting I got the house. I gave my mom and family 30 days notice to move out of the house. She came to me and tried to screw up the whole thing. I refused, she left, and the next thing you know was pure narcissism on their part. Can you believe it? Her stepdaughter Brenda came at me and threatened to sue me for harassment. She played the pregnant victim card like I could do whatever I wanted because I was pregnant. I said, "Woman, being pregnant is not a pass to be free from harassment." She tried to provoke my grandparents until we showed her the camera installed across the street from the house. I said, "One more step and I'll call the police." Then my mother came to her defense, accusing me of abusing and torturing her pregnant Brenda. She said she was going to sue me. I said, "Sure, let the judge decide based on the surveillance footage." When she couldn't win by force, her attitude softened and she began to cry, saying that she had done something wrong in raising me, so that I had become a self-centered person. She began to blame herself for not raising me well, and in fact she brought up my dead father, saying that it was his fault for dying too early and not giving me a good upbringing. I said, "Wait, if there is anyone to blame, it is you, not you raising me wrong because you never raised me. I was raised by my grandparents and they did a great job. You should feel sorry for abandoning me, but fortunately you didn't raise me, and I saw how you educated your stepdaughter. I helped her solve her pregnancy problem. I know I shouldn't have meddled in other people's business, but in the heat of anger, I naturally got angry with her. I realized I had overstepped the mark, so I kept quiet from then on. I said I didn't want to discuss it anymore. I just wanted my property back. I've let them live there rent-free for so many years, I really need it." I let her understand my situation, that I had quit my job and needed the money to start my own business, which is why I rented her apartment. She went crazy, saying that I was kicking them out just so I could let other strangers move in. I said that the other strangers would pay me rent, and if you agreed to pay, you could move in too. She went crazy again, saying that I had brought money into the family. I said, "There is no family here. You threw me away like trash. You were hardly ever here on birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Even when you were here, you made me feel like you were doing me a favor. What kind of mother does that? A mother like you, right? She used every trick in the book to manipulate me, to create panic, to create guilt, and her usual anger. When she realized I wasn't backing down, she left. You thought they moved out, but they didn't. Mom's loser husband hasn't shown up yet. The guy from the Stonecutter's head sent me a voice message. Dude, you don't know who you're messing with. I can lift you up and make you beg for mercy. One punch in the face and you'll forget about the house. If you dare show up at my doorstep again, I'll knock you out. The guy is huge and likes to show off. I don't know much about him, but my grandparents warned me not to mess with him. He's a bully. He was a bully, but he was also a stupid member of the SS. He threatened me via voicemail and set himself up as evidence against me. I didn't respond to him because I wanted to find someone stronger to deal with him. On the so-called eviction day, I went to the police station and registered a case of threat. I had solid evidence. My lawyer accompanied me to the police station and asked the police to accompany us on the eviction. At first, they were reluctant to come, saying they would call us if they got into trouble, but we didn't want to deal with the squatters ourselves. Some cash helped us persuade them, and they accompanied us to the house. When I arrived with my lawyer, her mother, Beale, and Brenda started shouting at us, and her loser husband came out with a hockey stick, but he backed off as soon as he saw the police car behind our car. The police showed them the eviction notice and asked them to leave. They were so confident that I would be thrown out that they didn't even pack their things. They asked the police to give them another month. The police looked at me and said that was impossible. After all, they had threatened me. They began to use Brenda's pregnancy to gain a few days, but I firmly refused. The police officer looked at me strangely and said I was heartless, but I was taking the legal route, so no one said anything. They further bargained, giving me 1 day, and I said 3 hours from now. They gave me a bitter look. Bill even tried to bump my shoulder with red eyes. The police officer yelled, "Just go, and don't look at the expressions." We all left afterwards. The police officer demanded that they hand over the keys at the station, where I would pick up the car. We had to pay the police officer extra to facilitate this, which was totally worth it. Anyone who wants to deal with squatters, my lawyer advised me to apply for a restraining order against their property in case they come back to harass me or the tenants. They are perfectly capable of doing so. We accepted, and the police officer gave them a copy of the restraining order and explained the consequences of violating it. The look on their faces was unmistakable, so I ended up getting the house and renting it out. I hope to get a good price and start my business soon. I've had enough of dealing with people who think they know better, and this should be my last update unless they cause me trouble again. Thanks for reading and supporting me. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My high school girlfriend cheated on me with her college professor. We were together for 8 years, so I got him fired and ruined her career. Now I'm single and don't know how to go on with my life. I'm 25 years old, male, and recently found out that my girlfriend, 25 years old, female, has been cheating on me with a college professor. To be honest, the news shocked and hurt me. She completely broke my trust, and I don't know how to go on with my life. She and I were high school sweethearts. I've known her since I was a child, and we even went on dates as kids. When we entered high school, we started dating in our second year, and we stayed together. Everyone thought we would be together forever, and we were even voted best couple every year in high school. She got into a Tier 4 university in our state, but my grades were never as good as hers. While she was at university, I got a job at a real estate company, planning to get my license when I knew the industry better. We often visited each other at the weekend as we weren't far apart. But I had some concerns. While she was at college, I never thought she would betray me, but I was uneasy about the possibility. To be honest, we both had nothing, and I was afraid that she would realize that she could have a better life and leave me. I thought that when she entered this famous Ivy League school, some rich lacrosse player would sweep her off her feet and she would forget all about me. She always comforts me when she finds me in a bad mood, so I stopped worrying. She got her undergraduate degree, and the university offered her a teaching position that would allow her to pursue a graduate degree for free. It was too good an opportunity to pass up, even if it meant we would be apart for longer. Her job is to assist the professor in her department with his research. He is a brilliant researcher in his field, with a group of students doing all the actual work while he gets to spend weekends with her thanks to her new job. Occasionally I'll go and surprise her, but she's always stressed and tired from work, and we never have any fun. However, when I do get the chance to chat with her, she only talks about her professor. She adores him like he's the lead singer of some rock band. At first I thought it was just professional admiration, but then I started to raise an eyebrow when I saw a photo of the two of them in the school newsletter, a harmless article highlighting the research being done in the chemistry department. The article contained many photos of students doing research, as well as some candid shots of people at work. I happened to notice that in one of the photos, his hand was on my girlfriend's waist. To some people this is just a harmless gesture, but seeing her older male professor do this to her, I immediately became alert. After seeing this photo, I called her and asked her directly about it. She laughed at me, saying I was overreacting and that I was always suspicious. We rarely argue, but her words made me so angry that we had a huge fight about it. 2 days later I gave in, called her and apologized. Everything seemed to be fine, and our anniversary was approaching. We had planned for her to take the whole weekend off so we could spend it together. When I got halfway to her apartment, she called to tell me she couldn't get away from the lab. I pulled over and talked to her about it, telling her how disappointed I was that she hadn't stuck up for herself, because it meant so much to us. She assured me that she would make it up to me and told me to just go straight home. I was closer to her apartment than to my own, so I continued driving. I figured that if she was stressed and tired, I could at least order her takeaway and stay with her at her apartment for a few hours before leaving. I took out the spare key and opened the door, immediately realizing that she was home. She had said on the phone that she would be in the lab all night, so this was a surprise for me. I could smell food and hear laughter coming from her bedroom. I walked in and saw the table set with freshly cooked meals and a half bottle of wine. My heart sank into my stomach. As I expected, something must have happened. I didn't know who it was, but she had obviously spent a romantic evening with someone here, and they were in bed with her. I walked carefully to her door, opened it, and found her lying in bed with her professor. They didn't notice me right away, but when I spoke up and asked what was going on, he jumped off her and she quickly ran to me, trying to calm me down. The professor tried desperately to hide his face, which was almost comical, and it was clear that he didn't want me to tell anyone what I had seen. I left her apartment, and before I left, I threw the spare key on the floor. I never wanted to go back there again. After what happened, it took me a few days to process it all. I almost lost my sense of the world. I had planned to marry my girlfriend, but before I could propose, she abandoned our 8 years of relationship. We could have had a love story to tell our children and grandchildren, but she ruined everything. When I pulled myself together, I realized that I needed to move on with a little revenge. Obviously, the professor didn't want me to know who he was because he was afraid of losing his job. I knew that once the headlines about the famous professor taking advantage of college students came out, he would never find another job in the industry. I called the university's time department and told them what I had seen. They told me they would launch an investigation. I knew that this would be my accusation against him, but unfortunately I didn't get any evidence. A week passed and nothing happened. I thought they had suppressed the story, so I called a local newspaper, which was very interested in the scandal. It wasn't long before I finally saw the news that he had been fired. I hadn't spoken to my ex-wife since the night I found out she was sleeping with her professor, but her parents were furious that she had gone public with their affair. Apparently because the professor she was employed to work for no longer worked at the university and she was out of a job, which meant they either had to pay for her tens of thousands of dollars of graduate school or she would no longer be accepted. She eventually had to drop out because they couldn't afford to take out another loan for her. She completely left my life, but I still don't know what I should do. She was the first and only woman I've ever been with, and I'm a little afraid to go looking for the next one.